And welcome back to Subculture on CentralCoastRadio.com. Well, we have got a very special guest right now. Nick Gardner is a music and film journalist from Melbourne. Of course, he hosts his own show on Southern FM, and he's very kindly offered to be on our show every fortnight and talk about what's happening in music and to take a look at live shows, albums, and music news and things like that. So Nick's joining us on the phone right now. So welcome to Subculture, Nick.
Good afternoon, Dave, and hi to all your listeners. Great to be on.
Now, Nick, this has been a huge music episode, of course. We've looked at the Rolling Stones' new album. We've looked at the Beatles' new single as well, but you've unearthed two albums that you've been listening to at the moment that you feel that our listeners should know about as well. Tell us a little bit about the albums that you've been taking a listen to recently.
Yeah, two of, I think, the better albums of 2023 that have come out a little bit earlier in the year, but still enjoying them very much, are the Pretenders' latest album, Relentless, and the band The Men and their album New York City. And just have a look at the Pretenders album first of all. We've talked about various bands who have been around for quite a while, and some rock artists I think have maybe 1 or 2 decades of great music in them before they either kind of disappear or become a nostalgia act. Although admittedly some of these bands do create far more great music in that initial period than most bands do across multiple decades. So we shouldn't be sort of, dismissing a band who's sort of, a little bit like AC/DC, I suppose, and the Stones to some extent. They haven't quite done the inspired stuff they did in their early days, but they're still around and did lots of great stuff initially. But one band who began on a high and without necessarily populating the charts in recent years have still pumped out consistently great records is the Pretenders. Now, it was something of a tragic history with the band. There's been the sad deaths of original guitarist James Honeyman Scott and bass player Pete Farndon. So the Pretenders have kind of morphed into different forms over the years, but always with the wonderful Chrissie Hynde at the helm. And I think she's quite sort of surprisingly underrated within the sort of pantheon of rock gods, not just among female rockers, but musicians overall. Now, appropriately enough, the Pretenders' latest album, which sees Chrissie writing again with guitarist-songwriter James Walborn, is entitled Relentless, and it shows her that she hasn't lost a step over a 40-plus year career. And the album surges through mostly blues-based rock with a hint of punk attitude, with that sultry voice of hers as powerful and soothing as ever, as she reflects on her career and life during what has been in recent years a pretty tumultuous and confusing time. Most of the tracks on the album wouldn't have sounded too out of place on one of the Pretenders' early 80s albums. It doesn't sound dated though, largely because their music was pretty timeless to begin with. As well as the guitar-driven stuff, there's some typically moving ballads that highlight the emotion Chrissie Hynde's able to conjure in her voice, such as the song I Think About You Daily, which was arranged by Radiohead's Johnny Greenwood, who seems to pop up everywhere, that guy. Now, people shouldn't expect brass in pocket or Don't Get Me Wrong style pop accessibility with Relentless, but a collection of rugged, intelligent songs from still one of the best in the business. And great to see them still firing. I suppose in a kind of similar vein is the album New York City by the Men, although a much bunkier kind of garagey vein. They're a band out of Brooklyn who have been around since about 2008, and they first unleashed the sort of ferocious grunge punk noise on albums like Leave Home, before polishing their sound on records like Open Your Heart, which is from 2012, which has a great track called Turn It Around, one of my favourites from that record. As many bands often do, they seem to be moving away from the punk roots and embracing a more restrained and diverse and even a bit of a classic rock sound for a while. But on their latest album, called New York City, they've headed straight back to the garage, from one of their most raw and primitive sounding records yet. This album kind of recalls the wild post-punk sounds of the late 80s and early 90s, bands like the Devil Dogs, or a kind of looser take on the sort of music we heard in the 90s from bands like, particularly Swedish bands like the Hives or the Helicopters. Personal favourites from New York City are the opener Hard Living and the, I think, ironic God Bless the USA. If you need something to purge the toxicity of auto-tune and much of today's overproduced commercial pop, this one will clean you out big time. That's the Mandan, New York City.
That sounds like the perfect companion for one of the interviews that we've got this week on Subculture After Dark. We've actually got Waddy from The Exploited on, and yeah, let's just say we've had to clean up that interview in order to be able to put it to air, because not only did he drop the F-bomb, but he dropped the C-bomb a few times during that interview. So yeah, so tell us a little bit about the Men. This is a band that when you mentioned it to me, I went out and started looking at them this week. I'm surprised I hadn't heard of them before, because they've got some amazing music.
Yeah, they're one of those bands who have just sort of been flying under the radar. They've got a bit of a following, I suppose, in what you might call alternative music circles, but doing a sound that's it's basically straight up kind of garage rock, but haven't perhaps had that kind of breakthrough that a band like obviously Nirvana did in the 1990s, or Kings of Leon had sort of a bit later on, and really grabbed sort of popular attention. But they've just done solid kind of garagey post-punk hard rock for a decade or so now.
Definitely. Now, this is a bit of a question without notice, but of course earlier on in the show we actually played the radio documentary about the Beatles' brand new single and how it's been brought to life by director Peter Jackson, who's actually developed this computer software that's able to go back over old audio recordings and lift things from it. So when they first wanted to do this with this new Beatles track, they couldn't get the dodgy guitar playing and the kind of rough guitar playing that John Lennon had done when he was recording it away from his vocals, but now they could, so they were able to go back and re-record the guitars and lift the voice. Do you think there are any other bands out there that might do this now? Like, are there hidden Nirvana gems or anything out there you think where record labels or bands might be able to use this brand new software to bring tracks to life that would otherwise be dead?
Yeah, I think it's certainly very likely. I mean, this is sort of revolutionary software, and I assume it's pretty accessible and available to most kind of producers and bands. So I don't know the sort of cost and the complexity of it, but I've got no doubt there's stuff in the vaults. They're always pulling out stuff from Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Endless sort of magic pudding kind of sort of previously unreleased tracks, and I've got no doubt. Certainly amazing technology. I was a little bit iffy about the idea of sort of resurrecting this track without John Lennon sort of participating, obviously, in the sessions. Impossible. But I kind of think that the Beatles were so innovative at the time that using this sort of technology is probably appropriate to their kind of overall philosophy.
Yeah, I always liked that when they brought out sketches of My Sweetheart the Drunk, the Jeff Buckley album, but that for me is just an absolutely amazing album, so I'm kind of glad that they did bring that out when they did.
Yeah, I think he's another guy, as you're saying, there's artists who they're probably going to unearth tracks from. He would be one that I'd imagine, yeah. I'm
willing to bet that some hidden Elvis track will be found at some stage too.
Yeah, I think the real absolute mega artists who are no longer with us are the more likely candidates.
Yeah.
Because that's probably more a lucrative option for producers to go to the trouble of unearthing and doing that. So yeah, I reckon Elvis, yeah, he's a prime candidate there.
I'm surprised actually there hasn't been some Michael Jackson ones surface, because I know when Michael Jackson used to record albums, it was not unusual for him to record 40 or 50 tracks and then just use 12 or 15 of them on the album and the rest would get discarded. So I'm kind of surprised that his family haven't dropped a few of those on us over the years.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got the profile that would certainly gain the public's attention if they did that. I'm not sure how it all works with sort of intellectual property rights and all that kind of thing, whether there are sort of issues, legal issues and complexities there. But yeah, I'd be very surprised if we didn't see something from Michael Jackson in that vein.
Awesome. Well, Nick, we might leave the segment there for this fortnight, but is there anything we should be looking out for music-wise over the next week or two?
Yeah, there's all sorts of, so many tracks coming out these days. As you know, there's sort of a deluge of new singles and so forth, sort of pouring out the entire time. It's almost hard to keep up with, but there's plenty of great stuff still coming out. I had a bit of a listen to an EP by a local band called Girl and Girl, called Divorce is the name of the EP, 6-track, and yeah, if you like your kind of the sound of British sort of new wave post-punk stuff from the early 80s, and this is an Australian band in 2023, but they do a pretty good version of that on the Divorce EP, so it's definitely worth checking out. Awesome.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other music stuff around at the moment as well. Of course, tickets are on sale now for the 50 for 50, the Mushroom Records concert that's coming up, which is going to be 50 tracks performed live by Mushroom artists, and of course the Taylor Swift concert experience is going gangbusters in the cinema at the moment. Actually, I should tell you this story. The other night at the Astor, we were there for the film that was on before the Taylor Swift film, and we're standing around in the lobby, and this old guy who probably looked like he might have been in his 80s almost wandered into the lobby and started to head into the cinema, and one of the staff ran over and they said, "Oh mate, just letting you know, the other film's actually finished. It's the Taylor Swift concert now." And he turned around and he said, "Yeah, I know. I love her." Yeah, everybody was a little bit of a surprise that an 80-year-old man wanted to go in and watch the Taylor Swift film. But yeah, there you go. There's Swifties of all ages, apparently.
She seems to have taken over the world. She's pretty much won everything. And one of the few people, like rock music concert films are notorious for kind of bombing at the box office, even for massively popular artists. But she sort of turned it into one of the biggest hits of the year.
Definitely. I saw the streaming charts a couple of weeks ago. This was before the Rolling Stones and the Beatles dropped their new music, so I'm sure that'll change this time. But she was streaming 20 times the amount of the number 2 track that was for that week. It was just amazing looking at it, just how much she was dominating the charts at that time. So, yeah, she's definitely very, very popular.
Yeah, I've got to say, someone who's recorded music I haven't necessarily been greatly into. I didn't mind some of it, but I had a bit of a listen to her doing one of those tiny desk concerts for the station NPR.
Yep.
They're kind of all over YouTube, and just seeing her just basically playing acoustic guitar and piano, I thought she sounded much better in that kind of environment, and you could tell the quality of the songwriting there.
Definitely. Well, Nick, we're going to let you go now, mate, but we're going to play a couple of tracks from the albums that you just talked to us about, of course, from the Men and also from the Pretenders. But we'll let you go, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time, and make sure that we tune into your show as well on Southern FM.
No problem.